What's up, everybody? Welcome to the CanesInSight Daily Podcast, baseball edition, powered by Anshar and Levine Accident Attorneys. Like every Monday, we have Javi Salas in the building to talk about the week that was. A lot of tough conversations going to be had here about things that need to happen, how Miami can regroup after what has been a very, very disappointing season and a particularly disappointing stretch. We'll break into potential adjustments, solutions. We don't have the answers, but we'll try to talk about it and see what we can do. First, I'm going to cut it to Pete with a word from some of the best friends that Canes baseball has.
This episode of the CanesInSight podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sala Astorita & Cox, a boutique law firm focusing on securities regulatory matters, broker-dealer and investment advisor regulation, white-collar criminal defense, complex commercial litigation, and securities arbitration and litigation. The firm aggressively represents clients throughout the nation. Contact them now at 561-989-9080 or visit them online at salalaw.com.
All right, Hav. I said last week was a tough one. This one is tougher. And 3 losses. Blake Sear out for the year. 16-19 overall. 6-12 in the ACC. I know you're talking to a ton of people on top of watching all the games and having your own thoughts. What's the mood right now?
D, I mean, I don't really know where to start, man. First of all, it had to be Florida State, right? So, like, our bitter rival, we're in Tallahassee. I mean, we're together watching the game on Thursday night. Tough outcome, but just to lose and get swept in the fashion that we did to like I said, our most bitter rival is tough. And you mentioned it at the outset. There's some difficult conversations that need to be had. I think the team that we had such high expectations for and high aspirations for, especially at the start of the year, right, winning the first 2 ACC series against top 15 ball clubs. I mean, it's definitely taken a turn, and a turn for the worse here the last couple of weekends.
And look, we usually break down every game. It's so painful. I think I really want to focus this one more on the future. But with respect to this series, costly error, some costly defensive plays. You talked about last show, we're dependent on the home run offensively, but these little things are costing us games. You did see the offense pick up a little bit, but really a lot of unforced errors that cost Miami here.
Yeah, look, and Dick Hauser Stadium, where the Knolls play, it kind of plays into that home run atmosphere, really short porch and right. We saw Florida State take advantage of that, hitting some long balls out. Every time it seemed like Miami was trying to claw back into the game, Florida State found a way to, pull out ahead and make it difficult on the Canes all weekend long. And that's a sign of a good baseball team, right? Like, we have to give I hate to say this, we have to give the Seminoles their flowers and the turnaround that they've had, from last year to this year. That was a team last year that came to Coral Gables and got the brakes beat off of them by the Canes, right? A sweep, gave up 40 something runs over the weekend. And now they're, top 5 in the country, a year later. So look, it was, you nailed right on the head in terms of fundamentally sound baseball. We just haven't made winning plays at a consistent level. And, when you get into this conference, it's so tough. We talk about it every single week. Last week, it's a top 10 Duke team. This week, it's a top 10 Florida State team. Like, every single weekend is a test, and it's usually a battle of who makes the least unforced errors. Unfortunately, in our case, for the second weekend in a row, we had more than Florida State.
And, you mentioned Florida State in the turnaround. I want to talk about that because if you're looking at a model for what Miami needs to do, certainly Florida State is going to be that model, at least in conference. Going from 23-31, 9-21 in conference last year, now number 5 in the country. So what are some of the things that FSU did? Obviously, everybody, I sure half the people watching this are going to say, oh, they got a new coach. But separate from that, what are some of the things that Florida State did to turn it around?
Yeah, look, I think, the hiring of Link Jarrett 2 years ago, he built a program, took Notre Dame to Omaha, which, I mean, for better or for worse, that's not supposed to happen, right? A Midwestern team, a cold weather team going to Omaha like that was a huge accomplishment. He was a Florida State guy, went to Florida State, was sort of returning in this king's return, right? And he's replacing Mike Martin's son. So it wasn't an easy job to, walk into. He replacing, obviously, Mike Martin Sr., Mike Martin Jr., who are, legacy family in Tallahassee. He's done a great job. And look, I think what he did take advantage of was a transfer portal. Went in there, got the best freshman at University of North Florida, got a guy from USF, guy from UCF, JUCO transfers, 2 guys from Alabama. So he basically, parted ways with a lot of the dead weight on the roster, the Mike Martin era, Mike Martin Jr. era, and said to himself, I need to win now and win big. And he went into the transfer portal and found those guys that fit the bill. And look, it's been like I said, a tremendous turnaround in Tallahassee. Not something that I want to, really keep talking about, and definitely keeps me up at night, but certainly something that Miami should probably emulate going forward. Is there's this pool of players in the transfer portal that are going to become available here in the next couple weeks and months. And I think if you want to turn it around quickly, you got to rely on some of those guys to infuse some talent into your program quickly.
You mentioned a lot of Florida schools in terms of the transfers, right? We talked offline about this, about how Miami needs to be involved with the best players in Florida that are not at Miami, or that are not at Florida State and Florida and not transferring, right? You played against these teams midweeks throughout your career. Did those teams have, one or two players that you would see and say, this guy could definitely play in our dugout?
Yeah, certainly. And I look, that's probably what Link Jarrett did last year, right? I'm sure they played against, South Florida, North Florida, all teams right in their backyard, midweek games. You kind of keep your eyes on guys. And, we've gone from college athletics being scouting in high school and looking at high school players to now you're scouting for, 4 years in high school, 4 years in college, right? Because you have the access to this transfer portal and this, talent pool. So I think that that's something that you got to keep your eyes on. You have a lot of these Florida schools coming into Mark Light Stadium to play against your ball club. Definitely have a lot of film on them. It's so easy to access information now. With this wonderful computer in front of you, you can get whatever you want in, a couple clicks. So I'm sure that's something they're going to look at. I'm sure you're looking at, the high school recruiting process, the transfer recruiting process. I think there's going to be some changes in Coral Gables in terms of who's moving out and who's coming in next year. And I expect there to be some transfer names coming in.
And also the showcase games. I know you played at in Cape Cod, right?
I didn't. I wish I did.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
I played in the Virginia Valley League, but similar to that, a summer league where, to sort of steal the thunder here, you kind of get sent after your freshman, sophomore season, sent away to go play summer ball, get some extra ABs, pitch some more innings. There's a lot of guys from small schools there. And I remember, I was playing with, University of Miami at the time. I was a freshman. And for a lot of guys at small D2s, D3s, it's a big jump, right? They want to go play D1. They have something to prove, and there's talent everywhere in the country. And now with the transfer portal and, no rules in terms of sitting out a year, it's so much easier for guys to make that jump. And I think there'll be mutual interest. I think, look, if Miami's going to be in an opportunity where people are going to see, hey, Miami's down. This is the time where, maybe I can pounce. I can, go and make an impact right away. I can be part of the turnaround. And I think that's something that I don't know if it's being discussed internally, but that's something that could definitely be a rallying cry going into the offseason, like be a part of the turnaround at Miami. We've seen it in football. We've seen Mario Cristobal rebuild the roster, in pretty short order. I think that's something that baseball's probably going to try and do this offseason.
Well, look, your career lasted longer than a lot of those Cape guys, right? So it was their loss. But in terms of, when I say the players to target, but in terms of the types of players to target, both just position, skill set, makeup, what kind of players, and be as specific as possible without, we're not naming players here. What types of players does Miami need on this roster? Assume we keep the core of Sear, Cuvée, Torres.
Right. So there's building blocks, right? I think that what we're looking at in terms of what the roster is, it's not bare bones right now. You do have 3 big time hitters offensively, right? Daniel Cuvée, Blake Sear, Jason Torres. Those are your focal points. I think as you look at this Miami roster, those are going to be the cornerstones of pillars of your program next year. You have Nick Robert, a freshman closer who's definitely flashed this year. I probably anticipate him looking, to pitch more in the rotation next year. Other freshman starters and pitchers that we haven't necessarily seen a whole lot of, but I know have the talent and, are projected to be impact guys next year. But I think Miami just needs some experience. We keep talking about how young the ball club is, and a lot of these losses that they've incurred are, late game fundamental stuff where it's not necessarily a lapse in judgment, but just guys who don't have that experience playing in those situations. So I'd be looking for guys who, 3rd and 4th year players, maybe some grad students, guys who can infuse some talent and some experience at the same time. And I think you got to rebuild that culture. It's tough when you're so young. Look, I played on some young teams and it's difficult. They've never played in Tallahassee. I think this weekend was probably a lot eye-opening for a lot of players where it's a big time environment. You're kind of back on your heels, back against the wall. You've lost a couple series, and all of a sudden you go into this buzzsaw that is Dick Howser Stadium. So you want to look for guys who have kind of been in the battles, have faced some live bullets, understand what it's like to win ball games, and at the same time bring that experience and bring that culture effect, right? You want to bring guys that are hungry, want to be part of the solution, want to catapult themselves and put themselves on a stage they may have never been at a smaller program. So Miami's in a desirable position to go out and find these players and bring them in quickly.
We'll talk more about recruiting as the draft comes and goes. We know who's coming. But is this a situation where you can expect a couple freshman starters like you had this year with Jimenez and Cuvée, or is that not in the cards? I know it's hard to project when you don't know who's going to go to the draft, but is that something that you could see?
Yeah, look, baseball's tough, right? Because you have this bogey that is the MLB draft, right? So some of the higher rated prospects every year, you're kind of 50-50 coin flip on, hey, are they coming to campus? Are they getting drafted? I know, in my years, it was, I played with my class was Christian Yelich, right? And Christian Yelich waited until the last possible day to sign professionally. So coaches are kind of on edge. Is he going to sign? Is he coming? What's the deal? So you never really know until the first day of school and everybody shows up on campus what you have. And then look, this year, I think, I don't know if they necessarily expected there to be so many freshman starters and play roles right away. I think, in a perfect world, you want to let some of those guys develop and, kind of find their way into the starting lineup. I think this year was trial by fire. We saw with Antonio Jimenez, Jake Kulikowski, freshmen that were thrust into big situations. Nick Robert, who was closing games, week 2 of the season. So, I mean, you never want to rely or, pencil in freshmen into your starting lineup, but I think we didn't necessarily have a choice this year with some of the roster, attrition and losing some big time guys last year. So I expect there to be a mix of freshmen next year. I think, if we're up to Coach Arteaga, Coach Gutierrez, Coach Fencer, they definitely want some more experience. That's why I think the transfer portal might come into play.
Now, it's guys that are playing better lately. A lot of negatives, which, it speaks for itself when you look at the record. But as far as some guys that are turning it around and playing their best baseball now, Jacoby Long is someone that jumps to mind. So what have you seen from Jacoby as far as turning his game around?
Yeah, Jacoby's had a really nice stretch here the last couple of weeks, especially in conference play. Jacoby was a guy who they, coaching staff had some high expectations for. Hadn't necessarily gotten the consistent at bats that he'd probably wanted, and it was just a matter of outfield was stacked the last couple of years, right? He just couldn't find his way into the lineup every single day. But look, credit to the kid because he stayed ready. He stayed on top of his game. He plays a really good center field, and the bat has really come around. He's hitting over 300 now in the season. So, you gotta give guys credit for always being prepared, always being ready. He has a professional approach. He's a very mature kid. He's been in the program 4 years now. So, nothing but good things to say about Jacoby. I think, he's probably been a welcome surprise for Coach Arteaga being able to put him in the lineup every single day. But at this point in the season, you're just looking for solutions, trying to problem solve. And Jacoby's definitely been one of the bright spots.
Another guy who he's had better series, but in the ACC, it's hard to think of a better series than what Cuvée did, having that 2 home run game against Florida State. What are you seeing with him as far as getting back on track with the power?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about Cuvée kind of going off track, and he was still hitting over 380, had, these tremendous stats for the season. And, this weekend, I think was a testament to, him finally maturing, right? Or not finally maturing, but hitting a point in his career where he knows he's the main guy. I keep talking about being the focal point of every scouting report, and it's so tough because when you're the focal point, he's getting the pitcher's, most attention every single at bat, right? Like they are told he's not going to be the guy that beats him. Saturday, he goes out and hits 2 home runs, single-handedly keeps the Canes in that ball game. You know what I mean? He had 4 RBIs. I mean, without Daniel Cuvée, who knows what this weekend looks like in reality. And I mentioned freshmen in tough environments. There's not a tougher environment than Dick Howser Stadium, right? That was packed all weekend long, great crowds. He shows up. He's a primetime player. He's a box office guy. Like I talked about cornerstones for the program going into next season. Like Daniel Cuvée is that guy, and I look for him to elevate his game even further. We were talking offline here before about his freshman numbers compared to Yo-Yo, and it's unfair to probably do that right now because Yo-Yo was such a tremendous player, but I mean, you haven't really lost much in terms of the production level. Obviously, Yo-Yo as a junior was far more productive in conference than Cuvée, but I mean, the fall off has not been anything that we can really write home about.
So looking forward to the next series. Bethune-Cookman, shout out to Julian Santos with his alma mater there. What can you tell me about that matchup and what it means for Miami?
Look, Bethune comes in on a Wednesday, and it's never a pleasant matchup for the Canes. They always have talent. They're a really tough team. They gave me fits my career at Miami. So I certainly know how tough of an opponent they are. And, the Canes are coming off a really tough series. They're losers of 6 of their last 7. So to right the ship against a Bethune is not going to be an easy task. It's going to be tough for these guys. Bethune is going to come in and they're probably going to throw their ace on a Wednesday, which is crazy to think of, but they always do it against Miami. It's one of their bigger games of the season. They want to make the tournament. This is a huge sort of feather in their cap for them. And then you transition into the weekend. You got Louisville coming in, right? Louisville's playing much better, 7-8 in the conference. And what is a down year for Louisville? They're still in the mix there for probably, I'm definitely to make the ACC tournament, somewhere in the mix for a regional bid. So it's never easy in this conference. I keep harping on that, but the Canes have sort of hit what I think to be their low point in the season, right? It's the 6-12 in the conference. It's kind of uncharted waters for this program. Coming off of hosting a regional last year to this, and it's definitely tough. I'm sure that locker room is it's been probably a tough week of practice this week. They definitely have a lot of things to correct and right the ship, but look, I think you still got a puncher's chance. I mean, they're probably on the outside looking in right now, but 4 ACC series left to play, 12 games in conference. It's probably going to take a Herculean effort to propel themselves into a regional position, but that's not to say they can't do it. I mean, I don't want to be, all, roses and rainbows here, because it's definitely been a tough stretch, and Coach Artiaga will be the first one to tell you that, but there's still games to be played. There's a reason why the schedule is 56 games long. They're 35 in. The next 20 games will be really telling on what the rest of the season looks like for this group and what, the future looks like going forward.
Well, on that somewhat optimistic note, I'll get my Caneswear spot in, by the way, as a Caneswear polo. People have been asking me in the comments, caneswear.com, get the nice Miami baseball polo. Fits like a glove. But on this note, what do you want to see, aside from, going on a crazy run and making the regional, what do you want to see from this team that is going to give you faith for next year's team? Obviously, we all want to see them not quit and everything else. Is there anything specific as far as players stepping up or position stepping up that you want to see leading into next year?
Yeah, I think, we've gotten sort of this wave from the starting pitching. Gage Zeal's been rock solid all year long, and he's been, the horse on Friday nights that Miami has asked for, that's always needed. And, he's been extremely consistent. I'd like to see Rafe and Herrick, the Saturday, Sunday guys. They've been up and down. We've seen the best of them. We've seen them struggle. I'd like for them to, put together a good solid few weeks. If Miami's going to, make any noise or, the last breath, last pulse that they have, it's got to be the starting pitching's got to carry them, and especially on Saturdays and Sundays. We've been consistent with Torres and Cavey. Yes, they've had their ups and downs. It's to be expected in a season like this. But, I think what I want to see, what the fans want to see, is just a team that continues to fight, right? The games haven't been blowouts by any stretch of the imagination. Like, we keep coming on here, and Duke was 3 one-run losses. Thursday night against Florida State, a 1-run loss. Sunday, it's a 3-run ball game, but it was close. So these games aren't blowouts in any direction. They've stayed in them. Again, there's no moral victories, man. You look at your schedule and you look at your record, it is what it is. Obviously they'd like to have more wins. They'd like to be in a better position in the conference, but they're not, and that's the reality. So nothing you can do about the past. Let's see in these next 20 games what kind of character and spirit this team has. I know that there's a lot of good people in that locker room. I know the coaching staff are going to have these guys prepped and ready to go. It's just, they got to string some wins together. They got to exude some confidence and again, build the rest of this season and going into next season, get some positive momentum going.
On Ray specifically, I wanted to touch on him because you're a pitcher. You're looking at this with a different eye than everybody else. Short start this weekend, has had moments where a lot of swing and miss. I've seen, draft publications talk about him on Twitter, because of the highs. What's keeping him from being consistent, and what does he need to do?
Yeah, Rafe's one of those guys that he's kind of an enigma when you look at him, because he's got so many moving parts. He's so deceptive, but I think at the same time, he's learning how to pitch, and he's learning how to pitch before your eyes, right? It's not like he's a finished product. And I think in a perfect world, he wouldn't be thrust into such a, important role for this ball club, but he's a Saturday starter. He's a number 2 guy. He's facing, big time pitchers every weekend in big time environments. So Rafe, who had 30 innings last year, he's blown past that this year, throwing way more than he ever has in his career, probably. So I think, the development side is tough with starting pitching, because once it clicks, and it just, he has those moments. Like I said, the swing and miss is really good. He has the fastball, the slider, he's got deception. He just hasn't put it all together yet. And I think when he does, he'll have a really long and bountiful career. It's just one of those things, D, where I keep harping on it. It's like the linear development in baseball is just, you never really get that. You never really know when guys are going to hit their stride. Again, he's had moments, he's flashed. Going forward, I don't know if Rafe is, what his draft status is. I'm sure the next couple of weeks will be telling in terms of what that looks like. And, if we have him coming back next year, but, I like what I see. I think he's got really good stuff. He's a good kid from all I've heard. He's a worker. So, I think he's got a bright future.
On Herrick Hernandez, he's an interesting one to me because strikeouts have been there consistently. Some of the results in terms of, runs allowed, not necessarily. What do you see from him? Can he turn that ability to generate strikeouts into consistent production, or is this just kind of who he is?
Yeah, Herrick's another guy. He just doesn't have a lot of miles on the tires, right? He's a first year starting pitcher. As of 2 years ago, when he was in high school, he was playing outfield. So, guy who's learning how to pitch again, learning how to pitch before our eyes. So Miami, we're looking at this objectively. They have two guys in their rotation, their starting rotation, their weekend rotation, that are kind of learning how to be starters. And granted, we're 9-10 weeks into the season, but still very young into their careers, very young into their development as starting pitchers. So it's tough to say that either of them are finished products. I think Herrick, in terms of upside, everything looks kind of easy and fluid with him. He's got a really easy mechanics, really easy arm motion. The ball jumps out of his hand, has a really good curveball. I just think he's sort of run into issues when there's traffic on the base paths. We've seen some big innings from Herrick. He's been susceptible to the long ball as well. So again, this is all part of learning how to pitch, learning how to pick your spots, when to go after guys, when to nibble, when to attack. It's all part of the learning game and the development game. And with Herrick, it's another one. I think he's got a really high ceiling. We've just seen the floor. We haven't really seen what the floor looks like yet, right? Because it's kind of a moving target. So Rafe and Herrick are two guys that, Miami really needs to step up these last couple weeks in the season. The bullpen has been taxed big time last couple weeks and throughout the season, So we know we got engaged. We need Rafe and Herrick to step up.
Hope it turns around. We'll be watching, and it's going to be interesting. And we'll have an interesting offseason, right? This is going to run through the rest of the season and the offseason. We'll be talking about all the moves Miami Hurricanes baseball makes. Thank you, Javi, as always, and we'll see you on Friday.
Thanks, D. Go Canes.